Today's about Abby and Libby, focusing on them.
Today was the day, but I didn't anticipate they ever thought today would be their day.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to J is for Justice. Today, we're diving into the details surrounding the tragic and mysterious Delphi murders. Abigail Williams and Liberty German, two young girls with bright futures, were brutally taken from their families and the community. Today, we'll explore the suspects, evidence, and the haunting social media interactions that could possibly hold clues to their killer. It all began on the evening of February 12th, 2017. 13-year-old Abby Williams and 14-year-old Libby German were having a sleepover at Libby's home in Delphi, Indiana. Like many teenagers, they were on their phones, chatting and sharing updates with friends. Libby was known to be active on social media, particularly Snapchat, and it was on this platform that she interacted with a profile known as Anthony Shots. The Anthony Shots profile was run by someone who posed as a wealthy, young male model, sharing flashy images to gain the attention of teenage girls. Libby was among those who interacted with this account, which authorities later discovered was operated by Keegan Klein, a man from nearby Peru, Indiana. Klein created the Anthony Shots persona to lure young girls into communication.
With 30 counts of child pornography and solicitation and is awaiting trial in the Miami County Jail.
Tell me about Anthony Shots. Why did you create that profile?
I don't really know. I was just lonely, you know what I mean? Just talking to people. I don't know why I did it.
So why do you think investigators are putting so much focus on you right now?
I have not a clue. I think it's because they said I was the last person to talk to her, is what they've told me.
And then she shows up at the bridge and they're abducted and later found dead.
Right.
And that was not you?
No, 100% not.
Investigators later found that Libby had been in contact with this account in the days leading up to her death. On February the 13th, the morning before she and Abby went missing, Libby reportedly exchanged messages with Anthony Shots, adding an eerie digital trace to the tragic events that followed.
Officials have identified the man behind a social media account that could be linked to the Delphi, Indiana killings. According to our NBC affiliate out of Indianapolis, court documents revealed this man, Keegan Anthony Klein, used a fake social media account to lure juvenile girls to send nude images. 17. It's unclear how or if the social media account is connected to the girls' deaths. Klein was charged in 2020 for child porn and child exploitation, but not charged in connection to this case involving the girls' murder.
Let's dive deeper into Keegan Klein. First, we're going to look at his charges from the CSAM material. And this was only 12 days after Abby and Libby went missing, 11 days after their bodies were found. This states, the undersigned says on February 25th, 2017, the ISP and the FBI executed a search warrant at blank. This is Keegan Klein and his father's home. While working ISP case blank, the FBI sent information to the ISP Cybercrimes Unit that an adult male was soliciting female juveniles utilizing the social media platforms Snapchat and Instagram. The adult male was using the username Anthony_Shots. Subpoenas were sent to Instagram and Snapchat for the Anthony Shots account information. Instagram and Snapchat returns provided a Comcast IP addresses. A subpoena was sent to Comcast for the IP addresses associated with the Anthony Shots account. They returned to blank in Peru, Indiana. During Keegan Klein's interrogation, investigators questioned him about Anthony Schatz and his conversations with Liberty German. Klein admitted to creating the fake account, posing as a wealthy young male model, but denied any direct involvement in the Delphi murders. In the following excerpts, you'll hear Klein's responses as investigators pressed him about his connection to Liberty German. Listen closely as they attempt to unravel the truth behind Anthony Schatz and what, if anything, Klein knew about that fateful day in Delphi. And I'm telling you right now, you can say you don't remember, but I'm telling you for a fact that you did not just talk to them during a sleepover, okay? I'm telling you for a fact, you said, I didn't exchange any pictures with them. You said I didn't exchange any pictures with them. I don't think I ever did, says Keegan. Investigator says, I'm telling you, that's a fact. You did, okay? Because the Anthony Schatz person, that fake account that you admitted to making, communicated with Liberty German on Snapchat, on Instagram. And like I said, it was not just for a couple of hours. So we need to revisit that. And we need to clarify that because right now what we have and what we can officially go with is you saying that, but we know for a fact it was a lie, okay? So that's what we know right now because we have the data, you know. And I made the comment in the beginning that Snapchat thinks that it all deletes. It doesn't, okay? So when do you think, how did you meet Liberty German? You didn't just meet in person. But how did you? Keegan says, I don't know. I literally don't know. It had to be on Instagram or something. Investigator says, okay, it was on Instagram. And again, you can't tell me you don't know. You have to know because this needs to be clear. This is something that can't be left, okay? Because we know through the records. The investigator goes on to ask, when would you say you realized that it was that Liberty German was the girl you were talking to, was killed? Keegan says, I don't know. Probably, a little bit after probably happening. Probably after it happened, I saw her face and saw her name. Keegan says, yeah, I don't remember talking to her. I remember talking to one of her friends, though. Investigator says, you remembered talking to her. Keegan says, well, that's what I remember her being there, like with her friend, but I don't remember ever talking to her. Investigator says, that's not what you said. Anthony Schatz communicated with Liberty German. And it's a fact that it wasn't just for a few hours at a sleepover. In your own admission that you said in the interview, it is a fact, an audio recorded and video recorded interview. You said, well, we never sent any pictures. And then the very next couple sentences, you said, well, I know they were at a sleepover because they sent pictures to me. Keegan says, yeah, she didn't. Her friend did. So you knew that day they were there. You had said you sent a picture. In this next excerpt, the investigators are asking him who was logging into the Anthony Schatz account. And they say, who was logging in? Keegan says, like I told you before, to these accounts. I do not. Oh, now you don't know again. I told you I logged in from 2 different phones, says Keegan. I had 2 different phones. The investigator asks, so who was talking to the girl you were supposed to meet? Who was talking to the girl about you were supposed to meet Libby and didn't show up? Keegan says, I don't remember that. Investigator, now you don't remember again. Keegan says, I never fucking told her I would hang out with her. I never said anything like that. A lot of this is redacted, but the investigator asks, so a person associated with that family, directly associated with that family, was talking to Anthony Schatz. And then Keegan says, right, probably blank had to be. Here's another excerpt where they ask Keegan, right before she died, we have witness statements that talked to Anthony Schatz that said they were talking about meeting up, even to the point so far that she said Anthony Schatz told her when they said, oh my God, what happened? Hey, I was supposed to meet her, but she didn't show up. That's evidence. Keegan says, I don't think I ever said that. And Keegan also says, yeah, that doesn't mean I killed 2 people. The investigator follows up with, I didn't say that you did kill her. I didn't say that you did. Tell her then you were supposed to meet her and didn't show up, though, because that's evidence. That's true evidence. So let's just focus on that for 1 minute. That conversation happened. That went back and forth again. I'll refresh your memory. Where the girl contacted Anthony Schatz and said, did you hear about what happened to Liberty? And Anthony Schatz responded, OMG, what happened? And then she goes and tells him what happened. And then Anthony Schatz says, well, I was supposed to meet that girl, but she never showed up. So let's focus on that one conversation of evidence we know is true, and it doesn't matter if you remember or not. Keegan goes on to vehemently deny having this conversation about a meetup. And investigators are trying to get him to admit that someone else used that account. And he's denying. He's denying that anyone ever used that Anthony Schatz account other than him. They go on to add to this mystery of the Anthony Schatz messages. And they say, so right after, and I'm talking minutes, that you are searching, police continue to pursue leads in Delphi girls' murder and girls missing after posting Snapchat messages article. All I mean that girls missing after posting Snapchat messages on an article you search, can you trace IP from social media? So you were thinking about the Delphi investigation? And he says, I probably was. A few minutes later, there's where you start searching about internet servers. So randomly, you're reading all these articles about Delphi. Keegan says, I was obviously like, well, I talked to her friend and stuff, so they obviously could see that I talked to her friend on Snapchat. That's probably why I searched that, because I was probably like, oh, fuck, I talked to that person's friend. Investigators don't get any more answers as to who else could have used that Anthony Schatz account before Keegan is taken back to his cell. The following day, February 13th, 2017, around 1:30 p.m., Libby's sister dropped her and Abby off at the Monon High Bridge Trail, a popular spot for hiking and photos. They crossed the old railroad bridge, taking pictures and capturing moments on Snapchat. What seemed like an ordinary afternoon would soon turn sinister. After being dropped off, Libby and Abby set off for the Monon High Bridge Trail. They planned for a quick hike and a chance to capture some photos along the way. By 3 p.m., Libby's father, Derek, was scheduled to pick them up at the same spot. When Derek arrived at the trailhead, the girls were nowhere in sight. He assumed they might have simply lost track of time. After waiting a few minutes, he tried calling Libby, but his calls went unanswered. Growing more concerned, Derek called Libby's grandmother, Becky Patty, to see if the girls had somehow gotten a ride back, without him knowing. As Becky picked up the phone, she realized something was wrong. Libby was usually responsible and would always let her family know if plans changed. Together, the family quickly organized a search, hoping to find Abby and Libby somewhere along the trail, simply unaware of the time. But as the hours passed and dusk approached, their worry turned to fear.
Peskovich, she is in Carroll County gathering information and joins us with what we know so far and about where those girls were last seen. Good morning.
Ben and Julia, good morning to you. This is the entrance to the trail where those two 13-year-olds were last seen. Officers, law enforcement, they have stopped the search for the night. But in the meantime, other folks have come out. We've seen family. We just saw a group who didn't even know the girls come out here because they heard the story and wanted to come out there.
Abby and Libby didn't return that evening. Their families grew anxious and reported them missing. Tragically, on February the 14th, searchers discovered their bodies about a half a mile from the Monon High Bridge. Over the years, investigators followed numerous leads and released 2 composite sketches of the suspects. The grainy video and the chilling voice recorded, provided by Libby's phone, became haunting reminders of that day. But who was responsible?
Guys. Downhill. Guys. Downhill.
Our first person of interest is Ron Logan. His property lies close to the Monon High Bridge Trail, and it was here that Abby and Libby's bodies were discovered, right on his property. Logan initially told police he was out of town buying fish in a neighboring town of Lafayette at the time of the murders.
This terrible thing that happened to the community and the families actually happened here on my property in my backyard. I was not home during the time that all this was happening. I was in Lafayette.
Yeah.
And I didn't get home till approximately 6:30 in the evening, and then the neighbor stopped to ask for permission to look back here for the girls.
Stephen asked Ron Logan to repeat those same chilling words. Listen.
Down the hill.
Downhill. Downhill.
But investigators later discovered inconsistencies in his alibi.
You can see Ronald Logan here on his property in this video shot by Wish TV in 2017, just days after the murders of Abby Williams and Libby German. By that time, the FBI says Logan had already lied to investigators about what he was doing on the day the girls disappeared.
Monday afternoon, I was in Lafayette Aquarium World getting a tropical fish for my aquarium. So when I came home, one of the neighbors stopped and asked for permission to come back here and look for the missing girls, and that's the first time I knew anything about it. So I fooled with my tropical fish the whole time the search was going on Monday night, but then they didn't find them until Tuesday, around noon or 1 or whatever it was.
Investigators believe Logan asked his cousin to lie about driving him to an aquarium store in Lafayette on the afternoon of February 13th. Police arrested Logan for violating his probation on charges of DUI and driving on a suspended license. He appeared in court March 13th on the charge. The next day, March 14th, a state police spokesperson tweeted, "Reports connecting Ronald Logan to the Delphi murders is false. Probation violation, no connection to murder investigation." But a search warrant filed by an FBI agent 3 days later, March 17th, says, "I believe there is probable cause to believe that Ronald Logan has committed the crime of murder, and evidence of that can be found on Ronald Logan's property. And that based on investigators' experience, it is reasonable to believe that the creation of an alibi prior to the discovery of a crime indicates culpability or knowledge of the crime." Logan pleaded guilty to a new charge of being a habitual traffic violator on April 3rd, 2017. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison, a sentence that would eventually be reduced to home detention. The search warrant application reveals never before discussed details about the crime scene and how the girls were found. The agent says a large amount of blood was lost by the victims at the crime scene. The agent also says authorities found that 2 articles of clothing from one of the girls was missing from the crime scene, while the rest of their clothing was recovered. It also appeared the girls' bodies were moved and staged.
Despite all the red flags around Ron Logan, there is no conclusive evidence linking him to the crime. Eventually, investigators ruled him out as a primary suspect, but speculation remained among some in the public. Ron Logan passed away in 2020 with complications due to the COVID virus.
Give me just a second here. Seldom do I have prepared remarks, but today is different because I do not want there to be any confusion or ambiguity with what I will say. Today is not a day to celebrate, but the arrest of Richard M. Allen of Delphi on 2 counts of murder is sure a major step in leading to the conclusion of this long-term and complex investigation.
He's not just a sketch anymore. The families of Abby Williams and Libby German now have a name and a face to put with their worst nightmare come true. Richard M. Allen, the man now charged in the teens' murders.
I don't know the gentleman personally at all, so I've probably seen him, but it's a small county, but I don't know him.
But Libby's grandma, Becky Patty, confirms at some point after the murders, Allen processed photos for them at the local CVS and didn't charge them.
That is accurate.
Okay.
Libby's grandparents say they got word last Wednesday that police had detained someone, a day they had waited for almost 6 years.
I don't feel like I thought I would.
The Pattys acknowledge the path to healing and justice is just beginning.
I've always said that I would be screaming on the rooftops, but we're not. It's sad. While there's somebody that's been arrested, there is, our lives for 5.5 years have been in a search mode. And that's what we've done. And you get up and it's like, oh, we're not doing that anymore. So we're all just kind of feeling our way and figuring out what our purpose is now. What do we do next? How do we help? That's what we want to know.
Monday, investigators asked for continued tips, saying they wanted to make sure if other persons were involved, they would be held accountable too. The Pattys repeated that plea.
I want to make sure that we have everything we possibly need and more.
After years of heartbreak and unanswered questions, Richard Allen's trial brought long-awaited resolution to the families of Abby Williams and Liberty German. Allen, who was recently found guilty on all counts, faced intense scrutiny as prosecutors presented evidence tying him to the murders. Among the most compelling pieces of evidence were statements Allen made to his wife and mother during monitored jail calls.
That on April 7th, a lot of this clustered around a few days in April. Richard Allen said, "Dear Lord, forgive me for an inappropriate touching," there was a different word used, "of Abby, Libby, and Chris," which I'm not sure who Chris is, maybe his daughter. But then at 1 p.m., "Dear God, forgive me for inappropriate touching of Abby, Libby, Kevin, and Chris." So the list grew, and no one was sure, like, why? Who are all these people? "I want to confess I know a lot more," he stated. "What more do I got to do?" he says. And then at 2 p.m. on the 23rd of April, he says, "I killed Abby and Libby. My wife wasn't involved. I'd like to confess." 3 days later, he says, "Can I talk? Can you listen? I killed Abby and Libby." Same day, "How do I prove that I'm not sane?" I may not have gotten that one right. That's not written fully legibly, even to me, the person who wrote it. But that's what I think I wrote. On 6/18, he said, "Why are you doing this? Do you know why I'm here? I killed Abby and Libby." On 6/21, June 21st, "Have I told you about my wife? I killed Abby and Libby." I mean, just sometimes real segues where the hitting them one way and now I've told you about my wife. By the way, I killed Abby and Libby. Just real confusing things. This particular witness said when he first came in, Richard Allen was normal, coherent, talkative, and after 1 to 3 months, he noticed changes. It was like he was not there, like he couldn't hear you, he couldn't talk, and he felt like it was doing outrageous things to get attention, that he would wait until someone was watching, wait until you're watching, and then he would act up and act crazy. And there was a great question from the juror at the end. Juror was like, I thought there was a camera overhead at all times. So isn't someone always watching? Why does he need to wait? Couldn't he just do it and someone would see it automatically? So primary concern of Richard Allen's on cross, he pointed out, was for the family. And he said he had the list grew again, inappropriately touched Abby, Libby, Chris, Kevin, and now added Dawn to this in August. Was that August? I'm not sure the date on that. I don't have the date right there. He said it was not this witness, that it was not a disorder if a person rubs feces on themselves, but if they eat it, then that would be crazy. And in fact, that did happen with Richard Allen. So Rosie said, well, if I told you he was eating his feces, would that change your mind? Because he kept pushing them. Didn't you think he had a mental health problem? Didn't you think maybe you ought to refer him to the doctor, that he needed some help, that there was something weird going on? And time after time, they said, nah, this is normal for around there. So he said, well, okay, what if I told you he has been eating his feces. He said, well, that still wouldn't count unless I saw it. And he did acknowledge that the other inmates were doing the yelling that we talked about. He asked the witness to read him his last rites. He was tapping his head on the wall for long periods of time, but not all that hard. And the witness, Rosie, said, well, you questioned the authenticity. And the witness said, yeah, he wasn't like slamming his head. So I just figured he, just didn't pay any attention to it. But he did it for a really long period, to the point where his entire face was black and blue. And then they informed the supervisor. He also refused food. He ran in place naked. On the 7th of April, he said, God, I'm sorry for wasting your time. I'll never smoke, cheat on my wife again. I'm a Libra. I may have written that down wrong. That was such a segue, but that was the point. So maybe not. He talked about rolling around on the ground, that Richard Allen would roll around on the ground. And he didn't call anybody because he figured, well, that's not really self-harm. And that's the only time they call somebody if there's apparently an actual attempt. He swear another comment by Richard Allen, I swear I never cheated on a cigarette. That could be a country song, couldn't it? I swear I never cheated on a cigarette. So make of it what you will.
During his time in Westville Correctional Facility, Allen was allowed to make phone calls to family members, including his wife and mother. In these recorded calls, Allen reportedly made several incriminating statements. Prosecutors argued that Allen confessed to the role in the murders during these conversations, describing details of the crime that had not been publicly disclosed. According to investigators, Allen admitted responsibility in conversations that were later transcribed and presented in court. Allen's defense argued that his statements were made under distressing conditions, pointing to his treatment in Westville Correctional Facility. They described how Allen was in solitary confinement, under 24-hour observation, and subjected to what they called inhumane conditions that had taken a toll on his mental and physical health. Allen's attorneys contended that the environment in Westville had left him physically weakened, mentally exhausted, questioning the validity of his statements to his family. They argued that these conditions, combined with emotional strain, could have affected Allen's mental state and led to unreliable statements made under extreme stress. The prosecution's case also highlighted key physical evidence, particularly an unspent .40 caliber bullet found near the crime scene. Forensic analysis linked this bullet to a firearm owned by Allen. Combined with Allen's incriminating statements, prosecutors argued that the evidence formed a direct connection between him and the girls' murders.
The witness said that he remained 5 to 10 feet from the bodies and that he did not have a firearm. Now, why, of course, is that important? And the answer is because of the bullet that was found between the two girls. So this is Pat Brown, and the bullet that was found between the two girls, it wasn't a bullet, it was an unspent casing. Law enforcement says they believe that traces back and connects and matches with a casing with a gun that they found when they searched Richard Allen's home. This was found between the two bodies, and it was found in the ground, according to what we heard during jury selection, or it may have been the mini opening statement from the defense. It was found a couple of inches down into the ground. So we haven't heard from the prosecution on that, and we haven't heard a witness say, I found the bullet. So we don't know a lot about exactly what happened there, but that's what I heard during, I guess it was mini opening probably. So at this point, he's saying, I didn't have a gun, so he can't be the source. And one of the things the prosecution would like to do is eliminate people who could have dropped that unspent casing at the scene other than Richard Allen. And since law enforcement also uses rounds of that same .40 caliber, the defense is going to argue that somebody else dropped it at the scene. At least that's what I think they're setting up, that maybe a law enforcement officer dropped it at the scene, but it won't be Pat Brown because he said he did not have a firearm at the scene. He said he could see lights from the cemetery to down near the bridge. So there was visibility. So statements that people saw lights across the creek would make sense and be credible. The girls were located 30 to 40 yards down to the creek. You can see the creek from where the girls were located. He did say that older guys would find the slope down to the creek more difficult. So I think that was on cross. I think that was the defense positioning for this would have been really hard for Richard Allen to have done. He was older, and maybe that second sketch, which the jury won't see, but maybe the younger guy is the one who actually did this. He said he encountered a few police as he walked to the cemetery. The way it was actually phrased by the defense was, and you encountered lots of police as you walked to the cemetery. He said, well, a few. I was guessing the reason that they were asking that, the defense was pushing for that, was because they were trying to suggest that there were more people who could have dropped that unspent round at the scene, that the scene was possibly contaminated by the large number of people who were there tromping in and about.
Prosecutors emphasized the bullet and jailhouse confessions as a consistent narrative, pointing to Allen's own words and behavior as a form of self-incrimination. They contended that these statements made to family members carried enough weight to be pivotal in securing a guilty verdict. After hearing all evidence and arguments, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on all counts. For the families of Abby and Libby, the verdict provided a measure of closure after years of waiting. As the verdict was read, family members of Abby and Libby expressed relief and gratitude, knowing that justice had finally been served for the two girls who had left such a profound mark on their community.
Good morning, 10:18, and we're interrupting your regularly scheduled program for breaking news. A sentence in the Delphi murders trial has just been handed down to Richard Allen. He has been sentenced to 130 years. We have a full...
Frances Gall, the judge said that in her words, she said to Richard Allen, you rank right up there with the most hideous crimes that she has presided over in her 27 years as she's been presiding over criminal cases here in Indiana. For that reason, she sentenced Richard Allen to the maximum amount of time in prison that she could. Like you said, 130 years. 65 years for the murder of Abby Williams, 65 years for the murder of Libby German. She also told the court this morning that there was an extraordinary impact on the families of the two girls. She said it was a generational impact. That is actually a term that was coined by Libby's grandmother in speaking to the judge and in speaking to the courtroom, saying the impact of these murders is going to last for generations, not only for their family, but also for this community here in Carroll County. Judge Frances Gall said these families will deal with your carnage forever, as she looked directly at Richard Allen. At that point, she said, you sit there and continue to just roll your eyes at me. And it was moments after that she announced the maximum sentence that she can impose. Now, we should point out there were actually 4 murder charges against Richard Allen, 2 for the murders of Abby, 2 for the murders of Libby under Indiana state law, 30 years. Now, before the judge announced her sentence, we did get to hear from family members of the victims. We heard from Carrie Timmons, that is Libby's mother. She said that this has been absolute hell for Abby and Libby's families and friends over the last 8 years. She said she was left with a literal hole in my soul. She said she still struggles daily with guilt and anxiety. And she said, and I'll quote here, I'll never understand how you were able to get away with this for so long, speaking directly to Richard Allen. The grandparents of both Abby and Libby also spoke to the court, at times speaking directly to Richard Allen. They said that they cannot forgive him at this point, that they hope in the future they'll be able to find that forgiveness. But right now they still sit with a tremendous amount of pain that they say will never go away. We will certainly have much more about what was said in court, about very powerful impact statements We are expecting perhaps for the families to come out and speak with the media. We know that Indiana State Police are going to speak with the media. We expect the prosecution team to speak to the media now that Judge Francis Gall has lifted what has been a gag order for more than a year. At the very end of the hearing this morning, she said that she was officially lifting that gag order, which means now that we can hear from the parties in the case, the prosecution, the defense, the families who have not been able to speak to us throughout the course of this trial and really for more than a year now leading up to the trial. So again, there was no reaction whatsoever from Richard Allen or from the defense team. The defense team, Felicia, didn't really say anything. They submitted a memo a couple days ago. They told the judge we're going to let that memo speak for itself. And in that memo, they said, we're not really going to spend a lot of time trying to convince you to limit the sentence, because at this point, the defense team is putting their stock in the appeals process. They say.
The conviction of Richard Allen brought some peace to the small town of Delphi, though the loss of Abby and Libby will never be forgotten. The families extended their gratitude to the community for their support throughout the investigation and trial, expressing hope that this outcome would allow everyone to begin healing. With Richard Allen's conviction, a long chapter in the Delphi murders has been closed. Yes, the memory of Abby and Libby remains in the hearts of those who love them. Their story serves as a solemn reminder of the importance of community strength, justice, and compassion for victims and their families. Thank you for watching, and may we honor their legacy by protecting and supporting those around us.